Hi, I'm Aimee Kurzner. I'm the Director of Furniture at Currey Company, and you are watching A Student's Perspective.
Hi there, and thanks for tuning in to A Student's Perspective, the weekly series that connects students with designers, manufacturers, educators, industry professionals, and design media celebrities to hear their stories on just how they've gotten to where they are now. Through our conversations, we connect the past, present, and future of design to show just how much we can learn from each other to grow towards our fullest potential without prescribed limitations. Think of A Student's Perspective as a weekly design lecture series from the student's point of view. A Student's Perspective is a division of the nonprofit University Hall of Innovation, whose goals are to connect students with the design industry through design challenges and mentorship, and a collaboration with the Marywood University Interior Architecture Program in Scranton, Pennsylvania. All interviews can be found in their video format at www.astudentsperspective.tv. For more information or sponsorship inquiries, please contact universityhallofinnovation@gmail.com.
Hi everyone, you are watching a new episode of A Student's Perspective. I'm Courtney.
And I'm Jen.
And we are with Aimee Kurzner, the Director of Furniture at Currey Company. Aimee, thank you so much for sitting down to meet with us today. Can you just take a little bit of time to introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about your background?
Sure. So here at Currey, I'm the Director of Furniture, but also I design basically all of the furniture product. And my background is I have a major in furniture design and a minor in interior design from SCAD. And I've had a few different sequences of jobs since school to now.
So can you talk a little bit about what that sequence looked like, getting from maybe your undergraduate degree to SCAD to moving into the real world?
Yeah, it was, it's a little bumpy. But, I think each step was a stepping stone. So right out of college, I moved to California, and I worked in a wood shop and designed and built furniture with the owner, just the two of us, for almost 4 years. So that is a huge learning asset to know how to build product. And then after that, I moved to Atlanta. And I worked for a mass retail manufacturer of furniture, more RTA, designing for Target, Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club. And then I have been here at Currey for almost 8 years now.
So what was that like, moving from, different realms of the profession, maybe something like you said, like a Costco, Target, to maybe more of what you do now is more like professionally just intricate design detailed for, each clientele?
The biggest thing I think with mass retailer RTA furniture is problem solving. You're problem solving every time you design a product, but for that market and making sure it can fit in the box, on the shelf dimensions, and or shipping parameters that you have to abide by. There was a lot of problem solving there, which was very valuable in my career.
And is there one that you sort of like prefer over one versus the other? Or do you think in terms of like working in both kind of RTA as well as, what you're doing now?
So here at Currey, all of our furniture is fully assembled. And we don't do any RTA at all, even like just the knockdown legs. Everything comes as is. And I prefer that because you can really see the full piece. The integrity of the legs, is strong versus having to engineer it where you would have to do RTA. There's still a lot of problem solving that goes on with any furniture piece, but I prefer one over the other. I think that doing the building of the furniture and then RTA, which is also building, right? It gave me that much more understanding of really when I did fully assembled furniture, how that might be.
And do you want to walk us through a little bit of what your design process looks like, especially coming from an environment of having to keep all of that in tune of what you're doing? You have to have all these parameters, but then you came to here and it's just crazy freedom. So I don't know if you wanted to compare the two design processes of that.
So they are a little bit different. I think for me personally, I do a lot of market research. I want to see what's out there, and I want to make sure that I'm trying to design something that is not out there. And when I was doing Target and Costco and Sam's Club, you're given briefs from those retailers. So you already kind of know what you're going to be doing. But during that process too, I was also given the task of going to Target, doing town presentations, and sharing with them what I felt the gaps in their assortment were, and then designing furniture to meet those gaps. And that was really exciting. And then that's kind of what I do here at Currey now. And as you said, it's very broad here, more so in the styling of the product. And I do market research here. And then because the majority of our customers are interior designers, I want to make sure that the piece is really distinctive and unique and they can't find it anywhere else. Because that's what the designer is looking for their customer. They don't want something that they can just get off the shelf.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's so important too because, you stated that, it's a little bit for everyone. It's a broad category of it, and I think that's super, super interesting, especially because, walking from showroom to showroom, everybody has their specific niche, but, yours is solely just to please the client, finding, what fits for that specific one. So that is super, I think, just interesting and great to hear coming from, that profession. So.
So when you are designing, is there if you're designing for a certain collection, is there a kind of aesthetic that you try to aim for, or is it you just start designing and end up getting where you get?
Of course, we're looking at trends in the marketplace. We're going to Maison Objet and Milan to see what is being done in Europe. I'm looking at our competitors. What are they seeing? What is fashion doing? What are patterns, colors, materials that are on trend? And then designing products to either meet any one of those trends. So, for instance, I knew this piece here, one of my first pieces here with Currey, that's one of our best sellers. I actually designed the hardware first. And I just wanted to make sure we had a statement piece and just go oversized with it. And did the hardware first, and then designed the cabinet around it. And I wanted it to be a little bit traditional in the sense that people knew what a demi-moon was, but it's modernized and clean and simple to go with the hardware.
That's really interesting because I feel like most of the time, especially within furniture and even just within schools, students feel like, you have to start with the big picture and then work your way down to the smaller details, which is interesting to hear that, it was the complete opposite for you. So do you find that is a specific process that you like to go through, or is it just whatever captures your attention within that specific client that they're looking for, and then kind of figure out what that process means at that time?
It's different for everything. Our creative director, when I started, I asked, what are you looking for? What do you need? He's like, I want to do mirrored furniture collection. I was like, okay, do my research, what is out there with mirrored furniture, and then come up with a new concept. And the other thing with Currey, we are known for accent furniture. We don't really do full collections. And when I came on board, we found that we did much better actually doing one piece, seeing how it did, and then expanding upon that in terms of a line extension. So we have a demi-moon cabinet, we might do a nightstand to follow. And with that, the design also changes a little bit, right? It's not identical because the pieces are different.
So with that, you kind of answered my next question a little bit more. I was going to ask more of the idea on if you had, designed this piece for the client and they really enjoyed it, would you work with them to create a specific next step piece or that adds on to that? I know you kind of said that you worked within the line a little bit more, extending off of that. But do you do more of that extension for the whole entire company collection, or
Yes.
is it more just based individualized for clients? Like, do you do specific work for them?
So because we're a wholesale manufacturer, we don't really have a specific client where I'm talking to them. And we want to offer all of our customers, our clients, a broad range of products, right? And you can't have all cabinets or all tables. You have to have a mix of everything. And I do believe that the concept of a collection matching, right? Each and every piece matching, that's long gone. People want a little variety in their life. And so I'm designing all of our little tables, drinks tables, console tables, all of our upholstery program, and then cabinets and chest of drawers. It's kind of top to bottom here a little bit with that. I wandered off a little bit from your question, but yeah.
Do you, when you're designing, do you tend to lean towards a certain product, whether it be like you like to design lamps, tables? Did you find yourself kind of being more creative when it comes to certain products?
I always knew I wanted to do furniture initially because I wanted to be hands-on and I loved building it. But I don't know, I was just drawn to the furniture, and in terms of pieces of furniture, I don't have a favorite, honestly. I think for me though, cabinets or credenzas really give you almost like a landscape, right? The whole front of that cabinet is your opportunity to make a statement or a piece, like almost like a piece of artwork.
Right.
And you can do that with a table. It's a little trickier. But I think cabinets, case goods for sure, I enjoy a lot.
Can you talk a little bit about like the balance between maybe a functional piece or something that is more statement based? Do you feel like furniture should specifically aim towards one or the other? Do you think it's very based on what the client is looking for specifically in the moment?
Yeah, it's going to vary. It's going to vary. At Currey, we are about statement pieces, and I love a statement piece because there's always a good story behind it, and statement pieces, the interior designer, the customer is drawn to it. I love being here in the showroom and seeing somebody see a piece from a distance, and then they just beeline to it and they want to touch it. That's why I want to design. I want them to see it and it speaks to them, right? And I think statement pieces do that more than an everyday piece. But
So would you classify your design as a lot more statement pieces as compared to just a general kind of hidden in the corner type?
I'd say yeah. I mean, honestly, the majority of all of our lighting and lamps, fixtures, furniture, it's a lot of statement pieces. And you're never necessarily going to buy every piece of this collection and put it in your home, right?
So what type of materials do you like to experiment with, maybe within the company, within your own personal endeavors? Is there anything that you are fully more drawn to because you just feel like the material speaks for itself, kind of, just evolves really well in the design process?
Yeah, it depends. Here at Currey, we love materials, and we manufacture product all over the world. And when I first came on board, we focused a lot with our factory in the Philippines. And there, we were using materials that you could only find in the Philippines and or that were just native to the country, such as shells. We had a beautiful shell collection where the whole chest is wrapped in shells. And then you can create the design, right, with all the shells. And then some of our best-selling furniture pieces right now are rope wrap pieces. So that natural story of the material coming through natural colors, like beiges, and the rope is coming from the Philippines. It's called abaca rope. And you can get it in some other places, but it's native to the Philippines. And we want to make sure that we're highlighting the artisans that are overseas and with the materials that they have available to us.
No, I think that's awesome because you are staying pretty authentic to where it's coming from and telling that story. I think I did see a little bit about recycled material that you guys started to step into that, if you wanted to elaborate on how that process is.
We have a lot of recycled glass in our lighting line at the moment, and always have actually. And we utilize a source in the Philippines where they're recycling the glass. And the way that you can really identify that recycled glass is the hue. It tends to have a green hue to it. And then, from my knowledge, most of our resources are recycling when they can, of course. But it just depends on the manufacturer.
That's really good because at this point, I think a lot of people are becoming more environmentally conscious, but to have your entire company just strive to, whenever you can, keep things environmentally aware, it's definitely helping, especially because you have such a big company that a lot of people are coming and getting those statement pieces. So the more that you're selling, of course, the more that you're producing. So it's really nice that you are keeping that in mind. That. Also, I think I did see that you went overseas, you went and traveled and saw the factory as it was. So if you wanted to explain a little bit about what your experience was when you went and visited those.
Yeah, so pre-pandemic, I traveled a lot. And so when I design the piece, I'll sketch it out, render it out on the computer. I'll identify what factory I want it to go to and what country. And then they will create the technical drawings with CAD. I'll redline that CAD, approve it. And then almost every single piece I go overseas, I see the original sample, the first sample, and we critique it and we make sure we fine tune it. And then before it comes back here, even as a sample, and I'm sometimes on the floor flipping the pieces over. I'm very hands-on when I'm overseas, and I love traveling and I love seeing the product first piece because drawing it and from your mind and then you actually see the full thing. It's like Christmas every time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. I'm really excited because at this point in my career as a student, I don't know what avenue I'm going to explore. So sitting down and talking to a designer that sketches in their notebook and then it ends up becoming a real piece like this, being something that you're probably very proud of that, and it just started with that one piece of hardware. So it is really fascinating to hear about the entire process, especially going and seeing it play out.
Absolutely. I also think it's really important just to note the fact that you are so involved with the built part of it as well as the design, because I think, there's multiple avenues. Everybody that's interested in furniture, it's the question comes up that, well, are you interested more in the manufacturing or just the design, or is it both? And a lot of the time it's like, I don't know, because I'm not sure what that looks like. So do you feel like, you were able to just keep that momentum from maybe going from schooling to actually doing the whole entire process from sketching to design to outputting that product yourself, like hands-on? Do you still feel like you can do that as much as you want, or is it maybe a little bit more reduced?
Well, when you're in school, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. And I think you're still forming who you are as a person, as a designer. And I think for me, I was very fortunate to be able to do those stepping stones, right? Work in the wood shop and really understand how pieces are made and have that experience. And I enjoyed it 100%. I loved it a lot, loved every minute of it. But there comes a time when I'm like, I want to do more, right? And what is that? And then going into working with a mass retail manufacturer, it was a whole new concept of designing. And I enjoyed it. But I knew there was something else I wanted to do, right? I think it's great to keep learning and keep evolving yourself as a designer. I don't know that I knew exactly what I wanted to do right out of school. I knew I wanted to do furniture, and I just didn't know what realm. And I think letting yourself evolve through the jobs that you have will kind of guide you. What you're good at will kind of come forward and be the presence. Like it'll come up, fall into it a little bit. But you also have to push yourself, right, and take the jump to try something new.
So do you ever find yourself or challenge yourself to kind of go back to those stages of how you were working in the wood shop and doing that hands-on work? Do you ever go back to that? Do you build scale models or maybe full protocol, like your prototypes of that piece that you've designed?
I don't anymore. I wish I did. I do a lot of house projects now to keep my hands busy. And ultimately, one day I'd love to have a wood shop at my home. I don't at the moment. And with our products being made overseas, we don't have that opportunity. And the pace in which we design, develop, bring product to market is so fast. With 3D rendering, you can see and do so much, but really that chance to go overseas and see the piece is really kind of that moment, right? Somebody else is doing it, making it, but then I'm there fine-tuning it with them. And a lot of the time I'll specify that the product is in white wood only, so raw, no finish, and then we'll tweak things, and then we'll add the finish later. And so kind of, instead of just saying, here's the piece, here's the finish, and it's there, I like working on it a little bit more in the beginning stages when I'm there at the factory.
I think that's really important too, because just thinking about, our own experience as students going through maybe design build and furniture specifically, like there's so many points as to like things come up, things don't work out exactly like you want it. Like you talked about 3D renders, you might miss something that's like so structurally important within it, and then you're like, oh, I sit on this and it's gonna fall apart. So like really like hands-on building it and creating it, you can see, every single moment that's, okay, this is gonna fail, how do we fix it? So
yeah, but you're always gonna make mistakes, and that's where you learn the most is from those mistakes, honestly. And then, you have to rely on what the past has done, right? A chair has 4 legs, typically. And, if you see a chair that you really like, that sits well, right? You're going to measure the dimensions, the angle, the pitch, but you can create something entirely new, but utilize what's working from that piece, right? And for like this piece too, the demi-loom, the scale, I wanted something for smaller spaces, let's say in New York City. So what is that dimension? It's typically 48 inches is a really good size. But I also knew, if you go back and look at books or vintage furniture, the demi-loom typically always has these legs running in the front, and they're going to have the legs in the back, and you're kind of designing, looking at history.
So now facing COVID and not being able to go overseas as often, what is a challenge that you feel you have faced since then? Is it not going over and being able to actually physically see and touch and adjust that? Or has there been another issue that's come up that you've been needing to face after COVID?
We're all adapting, right? And I think it's surprising how well we all have adapted. I miss being there, being on the ground, being with our vendors and artisans and bouncing ideas off of them, because there's that level of trust too that you have to have with the people that are making it, and they're very knowledgeable. We talk more actually, I think, on the day-to-day on WhatsApp or by email or Zoom, and we're asking a lot more questions in terms of photos and videos of the pieces before I'm actually there, which we didn't do before. And I like it because I can tweak it in the same sense early on, but at a very different stage of the process.
Right. And I feel like it makes you even more connected to that piece. You know what I mean? Like maybe pre-pandemic, the process was still, you were super involved and kind of going through every stage, but maybe more so now because of, all of the capabilities of working virtually, you can really feel like you're the one that's like making every single move with it too, which is really interesting.
Yeah, we've done, we sampled more too of, let's say we had an intricate pattern of marquetry on the door panel and it was 4 doors long, 80 inches long. I might say, hey, let's mock that up, just 1 door and small, before we go all out. And sometimes we wouldn't do that before. Or I want to work on new finishes, and they'll make finish, we always make finish panels, but sometimes I would wait and approve those when I got there. Now they're coming over sooner, approving them here in the States and then sending it back to put the finish on. But there's nothing like seeing it in person because your eye is so different in person, outside, or at the factory than it is when you're looking at your screen, right? Looking at your phone, and I'm like, zoom in on that, I can't see that, or then it's on the iPad, and can you take that outside because the lighting's not very good? You kind of make it work with all the Zoom.
So do you find yourself getting a little nervous once you end up getting to see the product, or you still feel like you're excited to see it, or is it a little mesh of the both?
I'm always excited to see it. Sometimes you get nervous when it's a piece, you're like, I'm not sure how that's really going to work out, or if it is, or there's always those pieces that you render, looks good, you're like, I'm ready, and then you see it and you're like, ooh, that's not working.
Right.
And sometimes you gotta let those pieces go. You can always continue to try and improve it, but sometimes it's just done, right? It's almost like sketching, right? You're gonna keep sketching. You gotta get some of the bad stuff out before you can get really the good stuff on paper.
I think just to circle back a little bit, you talked about, working with the manufacturers overseas and all of that. Is there one specific one that you guys always tend to work with, or is it very based on the furniture piece itself? And how do you, find those manufacturers that you want to work with? Maybe talk a little bit about the relationships that you kind of look for, whether it's value-based or, what their work kind of output is.
Okay. It's going to be a long answer.
Perfectly fine.
But, okay, so at Currey Company, we're really utilizing overseas in terms of the Philippines, China, India, Indonesia, and Vietnam. Now, a lot of our lighting is done in the Philippines, China, and India. A lot of our furniture is primarily done in Indonesia, Vietnam, and India. And it really just depends on the piece, right? So a lot of our cast aluminum smaller tables, those are actually coming from India. And then a lot of our case goods are coming from Indonesia and Vietnam. And in terms of finding those resources, Currey Company is well over 30 years old. They have long-standing relationships, but of course, we're always looking for new resources, right? And working on those new partnerships with vendors overseas. And when I came on with Currey, we of course had our vendor in Indonesia, and we were doing a little bit of a smaller business with them. And when I first did product with them and then got to travel, I was like, we really need to utilize this resource more. And so I designed more specifically for the capabilities of that factory. And we have really grown that business with them. They're our number one supplier. They're also some of my best friends overseas. They know what I'm looking for. I rely on them. I trust their designer too. I'm like, I can't see that person. Can you tell me what you think? So it's not sitting well. I'm like, all right, well, let's tweak it. And some people don't have that overseas. One thing at Currey Company that I love is the relationships that Currey has built with all of their vendors overseas. We treat them like family, which is awesome. I love that.
It's so important, I feel, to build that relationship because, you're really, like you said, trusting them with all of, your explanations, all of your design ideas, in order to then, make it over there and really, get into it yourself. So, to build that trust and have that value is really so important because that's the foundation for, the rest of the project.
Yeah, it is.
So when designing product, you mentioned that there's another designer overseas that you kind of collaborate here and there with when maybe a product is not going so well or maybe it needs just a little bit more pushing. When you're here and designing, do you have a design team? What does that look like? Or are you just kind of on your own designing and just setting that design?
So at Currey, we have 4 lighting designers on staff in Atlanta, and then I'm the only true furniture designer on staff in Atlanta. So when you say, is it only you doing that? Sometimes yes, but we all work together. So I'll do some lamps from time to time. They'll have ideas for tables or accessories like mirrors. So we do work collaboratively on that. And then in terms of the designers overseas, for Currey, we have a design team in the Philippines, they work for Currey Company in the Philippines, and we utilize them a lot on our technical drawings, a lot on the lighting, and then in Indonesia, primarily that designer that I work with, he's definitely more of a technical designer, but he's been doing it for so long, and he knows what I'm looking for as well, and I work off of his knowledge, and he works off of my knowledge more so on trend and design and things here. He's like, well, do you want a knob like this? I'm like, it's not quite what we're looking for. It's not on trend here. Let's tweak it a little bit.
That's really nice to hear that even, now in school we're constantly, I feel like, in group work or collaborating with our peers. So it's nice to hear that even though you're not necessarily in a furniture design team, you're still willing to hear other ideas.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm sure that plants an idea and then you just go with it, and it just ends up creating amazing pieces, as I'm sure you have in the showroom alone. So it's nice to hear that even outside of school. I know that we're going to be working with other people, but just that it's not necessarily in place that's how it works, but you already are kind of introduced to that aspect of it.
You don't want to work in a silo, and you can gain inspiration through travel and through research and all these things, but it's so different when you're sitting down with other like-minded people where their brains can work similarly, and you're like, what do you think about this idea? Or this piece, I keep going back to this piece, but I remember doing this piece in Harvard, and my team was like, really? I was like, yeah, I think this is gonna work. Let's give it a try. And then when they see it come together, like, oh, that looks really, really good, and good. I would never want to be all in in that world,
right.
Because I do learn a lot from the lighting designers that are here on staff, and some of them are older. They've been doing this much longer. They know lighting like the back of their hand, and then I know furniture like the back of my hand. But at the same time, it's still product, right? And we work collaboratively.
Yeah, it's so important to know that you have people surrounding you and supporting you to kind of just get to the end goal. Like, that is it. You're not like, bouncing off ideas with one another and saying, well, no, this is my idea. Like, I think we should really go with it. And, then you have somebody that's not willing to budge with the design process. But I think it's really imperative that you're all working interdisciplinary and, just having all of the ideas come together, for that end goal.
Yeah, and as you grow as a designer, right, you might become a director, you might become that leader. And so when I'm in that position now, we have a designer that I work with overseas too that I've hired to help, and he might have an idea, but then I'm tweaking it to make sure it's meeting the criteria that we want here at Currey Company, but also my design eye. And I'm like, hey, what do you think if we change that leg a little bit? And when you work with each other, you have to not be so protective of, like you said, this is mine, right? And you got to learn from each other. And sometimes that's when the most amazing things happen, right? Is when you really put the two minds together.
It really is. It's always nice to have someone, just a pair of fresh eyes, look at your design, because then they might offer you a piece of advice and you're like, I never would have even thought of that. And then it really just pushes your designs that much better at the stage.
So I guess my next question would be, what does the design process for you look like when you might get stuck, when you might not know what to do? Like, have you ever found yourself in a position where you just have a brain fog, or you're just like, I don't know, that's a great question, and then you're kind of like going with your teammates and kind of working it out, and then, what is that? Do you go back to sketching? Do you go back to modeling? Like,
I guess it depends on the problem, of course. I mean, as a creative, sometimes you're like, I'm done. My brain is done. I can't, and too, you need to step away from it. I don't know. I mean, and sometimes you just need to let the piece go. So I was saying earlier, like, I'll get overseas and the piece isn't working, and we'll kind of think about it and tweak it, and I'm like, look, we need to focus on all these other samples, and I think we can let this one go. We don't really, really need it. So you gotta let some stuff go. You don't have to push everything as far as you can, right? And then sketching. yeah, you're gonna get the brain fog and like I said, or two, you gotta sometimes get the bad stuff out to get the good stuff. And I like changing up where I work because the environment in which I'm in kind of changes me a little bit. And so if I'm working at home all the time, which I am right now, I'm like, all right, I need to go to a coffee shop, or I need to go sit in the park and bring my sketchbook, or go into the office, which we're doing, of course, and kind of be in that different environment to change it up a little bit.
So you talked a little bit about trends, looking for inspiration through what's happening now, going towards fashion. Is there anything specific that you just find personally that you draw inspiration from, or like outside of that kind of momentum?
Yeah.
Like, how does a project typically begin for you?
Oh, that's a good question. It's just going to vary, right? Our creative director shares trend presentations, and I might see an image that he showed as part of a trend board, right? And I'm like, oh, I like this pattern. And then I might turn it into a piece of hardware, turn it into marquetry inlay, wood veneers, where we took the pattern from, maybe Egyptian hieroglyphics, and I'm like, maybe we can do something Aztec-y and, just change it up. It just really depends on what speaks to me. Sometimes it's a piece of fabric, sometimes it's a pattern or a material. Like when I got to Currey and they're doing the rope wrap, I was like, see how I can integrate this rope wrap onto our furniture. Or it's jewelry. I love looking at jewelry for inspiration. This piece was actually an earring that I had seen. I was working with my colleague here, and he was looking at my necklace. Like, I really like that. I might do a chandelier with that. So you just draw inspiration from kind of anything.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So I was gonna ask if there is a certain mission statement behind what you do. Before we were starting this interview, you mentioned that just being in the furniture industry, that you can be modern, you can be traditional. So whether it's speaking about the style of your pieces, or in general, if there's a certain core value that you try to stay behind when designing.
I mean, always quality comes first for me and for our company, right? We want distinctive quality product. And I think almost all manufacturers really want that. The thing too here at Currey, in any piece, you want a sense of perceived value. The customer is not going to want to spend a fortune on a piece that doesn't look valuable or doesn't look the part, right? So you have to add those embellishments or make sure that the piece is speaking to that value. If it looks expensive, it should be expensive. If it looks cheap, it could be cheap. And that's hard to do sometimes, because sometimes you just can't get it done with every single piece, but you always strive to make sure that the perceived value is there for every piece.
Is there a certain material that you would say that when designing with that, the quality almost just naturally happens, or is there a certain material that it's a challenge to try and actually get to that standard of quality that you're trying to reach with each of the pieces?
It's going to depend, I think, on the manufacturer of that, the vendor, the material. Where is it coming from? How well can they polish the brass, right? Brass, people would say, oh, it's brass, it's expensive, it's beautiful. But if you don't have the right shape or the right form, or you don't have that right finish on it, it could look dull and not look expensive or beautiful, right? So it's just kind of how you tweak the material, I think. And utilizing the vendors, right? As a designer, it's very important when working overseas to understand the factory's capabilities and design into those capabilities. If you can't do that, then the factory is not going to be able to make your piece. And each factory is better at one thing than they are at another, and for each country, right, has different materials or can do things better or in a different way that lend itself better to the design. So cast brass that has more of a rough feel, we like German Indians. They just do it best. If you want something brass and it's really, really refined, you might do it in Vietnam or in Indonesia. And so you're utilizing your resources that way as well.
And what about, like, circling back to the beginning when you were talking about the client and really like focusing on what they're looking for within that specific piece? What does an example of a narrative look like for that? Like, is there one that you always just kind of go back to and think of, like, this was such a great moment, or an example of how that collaboration worked with the client, with your own process?
It's tricky.
Like, I know you stated that with this piece, you got it from an earring. Like, what kind of narratives have you typically found?
They all change.
Yeah.
But the narrative is really that story behind the piece, right? That's what you're asking.
Yeah.
And I think especially your Currey, because we're inspired by so many different things, and we're allowed, the design team is allowed to just show what is inspiring us at whatever moment. And sometimes it's not what was on the trend presentation or anything, so we have this idea, and we're allowed to put it out there. So the narrative does change. Our customers and our sales reps love the story behind the pieces, and I think that's what people are looking for these days. They don't want just a piece of furniture that doesn't have a story, or they're more drawn to, or they want to purchase the pieces because they have the story behind them. There's pieces that I've explained. I was like, oh, we're working on some tassels, so I've designed some tassel hardware, or I'm looking at how do we utilize fabric on case goods, and we have beautiful lacquered linen pieces, and I'm explaining to our sales reps and our customers of that process, and they love it. There's some pieces over there that I've done looking at flooring, just looking down at marble flooring and that pattern, and I translated that onto the front of the cabinet. So the story changes with every single piece. Sometimes when you're overseas, we do a lot of what we would call on-the-ground development. So you're at the factory, and they have a showroom, and it's just full of old samples sometimes. Sometimes new samples, of course. They're going to show us their new stuff. But we're talking years of stuff, right? So these little tables, you go into a factory and they have hundreds of these tables. And sometimes they don't even have a tabletop, it's just a column. Or I'm at the factory and they're doing lighting and I see a column, I'm like, that would make a really cool column for a table, but also the table lamp. And so you're inspired on the ground there. And I miss that because you get it done pretty quick. And I would be at the factory, see a candlestick holder, and I'd take the picture, and then I'd sit with my iPad, and I'm like, all right, we're change this, do this, and we're going to do a table, drinks table, we're going to do a floor lamp, we're going to do a table lamp, or vice versa. We've seen materials and patterns at a manufacturer that does a lot of accessories for us. So you can think like picture frames, right? That would make a gorgeous mirror. Let's turn it into a mirror. Or I want that motif and put it on a table lamp, on the front of the table lamp. Yeah, kind of mix and match a little bit, if you will.
It's amazing to hear that each piece inspires the next one, and then you never know, there can be a client that walks in and that piece speaks to them, but then they also see, oh my gosh, there's this mirror that also is just as amazing as that one. So then you're also giving that option for anybody that is into that specific thing that you produce. Also just about the story of the piece, you create so many statement pieces, so not only is it a statement piece in someone's home, but then it becomes a conversational piece, and then it's just this amazing thing that you create. It has led to more than just something to look at, it becomes more of an authentic thing to hear about. So it's really nice to hear that you have developed so much into just furniture.
Too, with that, the story is, you have so many makers out there right now, building products in Brooklyn, in Texas, in California, and those makers, they're really, that story is what is most important, right? And they're working typically, let's say, one-on-one with a customer. And what the customer is able to do is fall in love with that piece because they know where the wood was made. They've met the maker that did it or the designer, and they've gotten to talk to them, and maybe they connect on a discussion level, or they have the same brain, or they like the same things, and it leads them to want to buy more from that person as well. That's awesome.
So just to wrap things up and ask you our final question is, if you were to go back and be a college student again, what piece of advice would you lend yourself?
Piece of advice. To myself, I've given advice, but I think it's advice I've taken on for myself, but I always also tell students, like, that first job is never probably going to be your dream job. It probably shouldn't be.
Right.
Because you might not be able to evolve. And some people get upset, or it's like, I didn't get this, or I didn't get that. Well, you need to make the best of that first job, because it will lead you to the next, and lead you to the next. And this industry is small, but it's vast, and people know each other, and people are working with each other, and the networking aspect of things is really important. So I think don't get discouraged with that, the first job out of school, and also continue to network. Both very important things.
Well, thank you so much for sitting and joining us today. This was a really great conversation.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed the conversation as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. So that's all for this episode of A Student's Perspective. Catch us next week as the conversation continues.
We hope you liked this discussion with the design industry from a student's perspective. Please like, share, and comment, and stay tuned for more inspiring conversations to come.